G'day, welcome to Say It With Guitars. I'm your host, Pete Cornelius. Each episode I'll be digging deep and getting to hang with some of Australia's finest guitar pickers, songwriters, producers, collectors and makers. I look forward to bringing you these fun conversations and I hope you enjoy Say It With Guitars. Hey guys, thanks very much for tuning in to another episode and really appreciate the feedback and the comments for our previous episode with Jeff. And a big thanks to the listeners for giving me some feedback and just sort of touching base, saying they tuned in. It's really great to hear people enjoying the podcast, which is the reason I do it. Also, I've been looking into the liner notes of that Tom Waits record I referenced for the guitar tone that I was really into. It's on Swordfish trombone. And the guitar player at the time was Fred Tackett, who's also spent a bit of time with Little Feat and Bob Dylan. So yeah, there you go, Fred Tackett. Check it out, folks. Tom Waits, Swordfish trombone. Oh, and the song was called Gin Soak Boy. Before we crack into today's show, I'd like to shout out to our sponsor, Mr. Billy Tarrant from Tarrant Guitars. Billy's an amazing luthier and he makes some real sweet instruments. I'm lucky enough for him to have built me a 00 size acoustic guitar, which I've dragged all around the country and it's sounding better than ever. So yeah, check out tarrantguitars.net.au, Tassie's one-stop custom workshop for custom-made guitars, all guitar repairs and services. Let's get into the show. Quite possibly the most joyous blues singer, fingerpicker and purveyor of good voodoo, please let me introduce to Say It With Guitars today's guest, Fiona Boyes. Fiona, how you going?
I'm good. How are you going, Pete?
Yeah, I'm going really good. Very well. How's things in your neck of the woods?
Well, it's cold and wet in the Northern Rivers, which is where we've been getting used to wet lately with all the flooding, but the cold's not so welcome.
Oh, you can always warm up, you can always throw a log on the fire.
Spoken like a true Tasmanian.
Yeah, you got to indulge in the cold in the off season.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying before the show started, I went for a little surf this morning and the water was actually warmer than the air. So I think the air temperature was about 9 or 10 degrees. Yeah, it's cold.
I remember actually that must have been the last time I was in Tassie was maybe Devonport Jazz Festival, and I saw people surfing the mouth of the river there.
Yes.
And some of them were surfing, it was freezing. And people were surfing, some of them even had crash helmets on because the break there is not only do you have the elements to deal with, but it's actually in the mouth of the river quite near large submerged rocks.
Yes, and there's a big spirit of Tasmania that comes in there. You don't want to hit that either.
I did, and I actually took some footage of that to post to the Northern Rivers surfing community to go, look, you need to know some people are more serious than you.
Yeah, harden up you lot. You got it easy.
I know. Yeah.
So how long have you been up the Northern Rivers? I think last time we got to hang out, you were in Canberra, maybe.
Yes, well, we went from Canberra to Gippsland in Victoria for a couple of years. I've actually been in the Northern Rivers in a gorgeous town called Yamba, about an hour and a bit south of Byron, for about 6 years now, and it's the longest we've been anywhere. But it's funny you should ask because we will be on the move in a couple of months, heading to Bega. So we're heading a bit further south.
Cheeseland.
Yes, that's right. So it will be sad to leave Yamba. It's been a gorgeous place to be, but just for various personal reasons and because of things have been very difficult in the Northern Rivers for rentals and things like that since the flooding, or it's increasingly been a problem in the regions. So that's what's moving us on.
How did you guys go in the flood? You didn't get too damaged, or your community was okay, or?
It had quite a profound effect on the community, and it continues to do so. Everybody's still sort of pitching in, and and doing fundraisers. We did a little fundraiser here just with some local musicians and raised over $10,000, which was great.
Oh, nice.
But the need has been really quite profound. Here in Yamba, we're quite used to being flooded. It's a flood-prone area, but it's about 18 k's from the highway to the town, only one road in and out, and it traditionally floods about halfway. So you often get cut off for a day or two if it floods, and that's happened a few times since we've been here, but this time it actually flooded in town, which knowing some of the locals who've come from foundational families here, as far as I know, that's not ever happened before. Yeah. So it was knee-deep outside Coles, and I did sandbag our back door.
Yep.
We're right opposite an arm of the river, so it was coming in and out at high tide. It'd come halfway up the driveway at high tide, and then it'd go down, and you could get out again.
Yeah.
But the main thing is being cut off was the ancillary things that happened then, like literally walking into Coles, there's one sort of big supermarket, and there was nothing on the shelves because no trucks could get in. The highway was closed for an hour in either direction.
Yep.
So big stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty dramatic. And even during the pandemic, I think seeing supermarket shelves empty, everyone doing the panic buy business, and I think it's been a good little, I wouldn't say wake up, but it's been a good, incentive to go out and be a bit more sustainable, like have some veggies in the backyard, or maybe go and, be a bit more prepared, or not say prepared, but just like live life to your means, and sort of, if you can, be a bit more self-sustainable in that regard, Yeah.
When everyone was saying, isn't it crook, or, my income's been cut, you just go, well, it's apart from the fact that you can't gig, it's like, welcome to the world of a musician. What I call the musician's life is, I remember years ago actually having an accountant who it was going to do my tax or help me, and he just looked at me when I gave him all the figures, and he just said, "How do you live?" And I said, "Well, clearly not like you. Not with 2.5 children in a double-story house somewhere in the burbs." But I mean, I actually call it financial levitation. But I think that's also something that is endemic to the world of the arts and for people who are creatives. I mean, when I think it's tough being a musician at times, I think, well, it could be worse. I could be a sculptor or a poet.
I could be in the jazz genre. Those guys are doing it hard too.
Yeah.
So maybe can we start with a little bit of a background, Fiona? I've had a little bit of research. I've taken a few notes of what you've been up to, but it's better to hear it from your perspective. So you didn't start playing guitar till you were a bit later, till you were 26. Is that right?
Yeah, I played clarinet when I was a kid. I did the
licorice stick,
the recorder, a couple of years of piano when I was really little, and all those. I think it's fabulous having music in schools and exposing kids to whatever instruments. Nothing will be wasted, because I think you get some really good basic grounding. I played clarinet in the first few years of high school, and I actually had it to a pretty good standard. But again, the idea that music should be joyful, although I was quite competent on the instrument for the stage I was at, it was like I had to skip a class from my regular classwork to go to the music lesson. And I just kept getting the next bit of Debussy for the next exam, which, looking back on it, for a clarinet player, maybe if I had had a chance to play in a New Orleans jazz ensemble, or, something that was more collaborative and more joyful, and, because I couldn't play the instrument unless I had music in front of me. I couldn't jam. So to me, that was the true joy then of learning instrument by ear. I did the curious thing that I think women often do, and hopefully do less these days, which is when you get to teenagehood and it's not very cool, you end up following boys around, watching them play guitars and stuff.
Yeah.
Clarinet wasn't very cool, so I dropped that and just, watched the guys play. I got to college and became a huge blues fan. I was lucky in my orientation week to discover that there was a folk and blues club on campus where I was studying graphic design.
Cool. Yep.
So through that, suddenly I was exposed to some real, like the president of the Blues Society, Kim Windsor, who later became a long-term partner for many years. Was very keen on early blues, like music. So my first exposure to all this very, traditional blues, documentary recordings from the 20s and 30s. So unlike a lot of people that fall in love with rock and roots, I started with the roots, became a blues fan, lots of bands playing in Melbourne. Melbourne's always been great for music. So lots of bands playing where you could go out most nights of the week and see blues, live blues. You can see acts coming in from America. So I'm a fan for years. And then finally, at one point, I decided actually I want to just borrow a guitar and have a go at trying to play this music I love myself.
My baby got trouble, ain't got no sense, he ain't got no money, he can't pay rent. Well, he ain't a doctor, yeah, but he can operate. My baby ain't a teacher, but he could educate. And that's my boy, yeah, that's my boy. Don't say nothing about my man. Hey, Lordy, that's my boy.
That's great. Yeah, it does seem like Melbourne was a great hotspot for not only local performers, but for interstate or international. You hear lots of stories of people seeing maybe like Leighton Hopkins, or maybe they might have saw Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, that sort of stuff. Like they toured.
Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, and then later on at the corner place, Charlie Musselwhite, Little Ed and the Imperials.
Yep.
All sorts of people came out, and there was often quite
a lot
of people
from that
coming.
Alligator sort of record, 80s kind of blues boom.
Yeah, there was. And I think, although there's a lot of competition to live music and there's a lot of discussion culturally about, the shrinking of live events, and the pandemic has made that worse. But I think Melbourne still is a good town for music. I know certainly it's always hard to make a living, but, you can actually, I think, put together a really eclectic band and still find a gig for it.
Yes.
And I'm thinking of, my long-term drummer, Mark Grundon, who played with Bad Boys Batacata. You can it was a drumming ensemble, and yet they had a long-term residency. If someone says to you, I'm putting together a Tibetan throat singing ensemble, you'd go, yeah, you'd still probably get a gig for it in Melbourne.
Yep, you'd find the right pub and a crowd would roll up and you have a great night. That's terrific. Yeah, Melbourne does seem like it still does seem like a very happening city, full of creative types. It's great. I think Hobart's
sorry.
I was just going to say, I think Hobart, since the creation of that Mona Museum, the art scene down here has really gone bananas. It's been so well supported. And like you said, there's diversity now. It's not just, we play this sort of music. It's like, anything's welcome. And and that's what's been great about that Mona itself. They do music a lot. They have a lot of live performance, and I think they almost encourage you to get it a little bit off the mainstream.
Mona is definitely on my wish list. Yeah, I've actually been thinking about that a lot more because I think it's been a long time, between drinks, visits down south, and I love art as well as music. So it's been interesting during the pandemic that those some of those threads, which were already happening, I have come together, kind of exploring my own versions of Mississippi-style folk art and doing all sorts of things, having to create, little video clips and YouTube channels. I think everybody tried to be as cunning as they could to keep their creativity alive and to, find outlets when we were all locked down for a while there, yeah.
I was going to ask you about your artwork. So I've noticed you've been doing a lot of lino prints, and you've been painting a lot of the cigar box guitars that Steve's making.
Yeah.
So you guys are getting, very creative at home. It's cool. So do you reckon that artistic thing spurs from your college days? You said you did an arts, was it a degree, or what did you do it?
Back in the day it was a diploma of graphic design at Swinburne in Melbourne. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because I did work in graphic design or, in various, settings. My last gig as a grapho was for Lonely Planet, having gone off and done a year of travelling internationally. When I got back, I ended up, working for a production house. I worked for an advertising agency at the beginning. I sort of worked out pretty quickly that I wasn't cut out for the cut and thrust of advertising, which is where, so many commercial artists go. And I didn't do a lot of art for myself, although I've always had a keen appreciation for it. And in the last 8 or 10 years, I had a chance to increasingly tour internationally, and it was fantastic, some of the tours I've done in Europe, because not only would you get to play to very appreciative audiences in some of those places, but often you could have a chance to dig deep into some local art and culture and architecture while you were there. So to finally get a gig somewhere like Vienna and go, I've got a day off, I'm going to go and see the Gustav Klimt and wonderful, and so there's been those experiences along with repeated visits to places like Clarksdale, Mississippi, where you have a lot of traditional musicians who are both artists and musicians, and it kind of is you have to explain it a bit here in Australia, but over there in a lot of those kind of places, it's not unusual at all to have people who make their own instruments and decorate them and do folk art as well as play blues, so it's and I figure that it's all coming from the same wellspring, and it kind of there again nothing is wasted. So when if you kind of live by your wits and creativity, it becomes something that's not a career as much as it's vocational. It's like you can't help it, you have to do it, and at times you might find that you're a little bit stuck. You haven't written a song for a while, but you have been building and painting cigar box guitars or something. And or for example, the cigar box guitars, which has been a recent sort of love affair I've had. I started off as an acoustic country blues finger picker, and that still informs everything I do, and I'm still a finger picker, even on electric. But then moving to electric, and then, before I started into playing cigar boxes and exploring them, I didn't even really play slide. And now it's become a bit of a signature thing. But, if you look back on it, I've over a 30-year career or whatever, I've actually only played slide in the last 6 to 7 years.
Yep.
I was focusing on acoustic finger picking, which is a very intricate style where you're trying to do bits of bass line and bits of rhythm guitar and bits of lead and sing. You're trying to be the one-person band.
Absolutely.
So then it was a huge learning curve to suddenly then play with a band and go, well, my role as a guitarist is different now because I have to think about straight rhythm guitar and straight single note solos, which I'd never done before. And then you sort of, you do that for a bit. And then, I started, playing more in a trio, which changed how I wanted my guitars to sound. And then the cigar boxes has been a part of the joy of them is the idea that they're so rudimentary that everything you know about guitar throw away, and you've got, 2 notes, 3 strings. So the joy is actually wringing some music out of them. And it amazes me that people have sometimes said to me, oh, you play blues, that's a bit derivative, or did you not get bored? And I think you just totally have not got it. You haven't got it. You don't understand that there's so many regional styles, and blues is such a wide-ranging genre that it seems to me in my creative life that whenever you get to one point, you see another hill across the way and you go and climb that.
Yeah, I agree. Everything you learn across your journey of discovering music, or just like feeling different styles, or just like becoming emotionally attached to different sort of styles of music, there's always someone like reinventing that, or not reinventing, but perhaps like putting their spin on it. So then it informs another journey. It's such a great adventure, isn't it? As a performer and a listener, and I guess we're just getting educated all the time. And it's what a great time to be alive in. Like everyone says how YouTube's such a great resource. It's incredible. Like it really is. And you can learn so much. You can imagine starting to play guitar now or something.
I'm the resources available if you're interested in something is just amazing. I actually remember when I first became a blues fan, and people go, back in the day, I wore an onion on my bank belt, whatever. But yeah, it was hard to get hold of these resources. And I remember actually at one point buying a season's ticket to a cinema club, not because I was somewhat interested in art cinema, but the main thing was I saw on their season's program that they had one night dedicated to archival historic footage of blues performers. So I was buying the season ticket just to go that night.
Yeah.
This is all the stuff probably which would have been the material that's all available on the American folk revival tours that went to Europe. A lot of that footage was taken by Europeans, and God bless them, because that's actually some of the best material we have.
It's well shot. It sounds great.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Of those players. But, you can see all that on YouTube.
Yeah.
And that is a wonderful resource. But I've got to say that one of the things that for me personally has been really pivotal is my opportunity to go to America. So, my first trip in 2003, and then repeated visits, because in those visits to the home of the blues, I've been lucky enough to meet some of my blues heroes who I would never have imagined even having a chance to see most of these players, let alone meet them, let alone record or tour or hang out with them or play with them. So that idea that blues is actually an historic traditional style of blues, where you have younger players sitting at the knees of the elder statesmen and women of the music, and it's passed to you by actually listening not only to the music but to the stories, and to like that respect for elders, and listening to those older players and having that personal connection to the music, and then trying to take, when you're writing in a traditional style, you want to be respectful of the frameworks, but you also want to try and find your own voice within it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the chance to meet older players and sit with them has been just an incredible experience for me.
Can we talk about that? I guess when you first went to the States, you said, what was it, 2003, did you say?
Yeah, yeah.
Was that on one of those Memphis Blues Challenge programs, or was that just you just going, let's go buy some tickets, or how did that all come about?
Well, I'd done quite a lot of travelling in my youth, when my early 20s, and which is a very Aussie thing to do. But of course, back in those days, I was much more interested in exotic cultures. So I went to, Southeast Asia, India, Nepal, all those kind of places. And then, of course, on to Europe and, find your roots back in England and Scotland. And America didn't really interest me at all. And then it was thinking more about my love of blues, then it became an interest to want to go to America and do a blues pilgrimage. But, of course, by then I actually was a musician, so I was broke. So therein lies the problem. So it was winning the right to represent the Melbourne Blues Appreciation Society in Memphis that they sponsored a ticket for me to go to Memphis to play. So this is my first trip to America, and it was fantastic, because I'd never been to the States before. I went straight to, I'm in Memphis. I'm playing on Beale Street, which is a hugely historic place for the blues, and a place where a lot of my blues heroes would have played back in the day.
Yep.
And the idea that I was, playing my tribute song to Memphis Minnie, aware that she would have played on Beale. And it was
full circle stuff.
Yeah, everything was brand new, and I had no idea what was going on, and I really didn't have any expectations of the competition, because I was just thrilled to be there, and I didn't know whether what they would think of my stuff, or a lot of my songs had sort of stories attached to them. Would they get my accent? Would they get my sense of humour? Would they think it was appropriating or weird? I don't know. So I just thought, well, all you can do is be yourself.
I want to tell about many people try and understand. Oh, well, they said that little gal, she played guitar just like a man. Imagine that, she could play that thing. She loved dressing like a lady, all them fancy clothes. She wore a silver dollar lace, and people every place she'd go. And one day she rode back into town with a new car and a National Steel guitar. The folks round there would see nothing like it. Well, now all life was traveling, any place that she could play, because she sure won't be out in the fields working every day. And I believe her life was hard, but she loved the blues. Man, that gal could play 'em.
But, then I ended up winning. So then I was the first non-American to win. And that clearly opened some doors for me to go back and meet people and the preacher, my wonderful partner in crime, my husband, Steve Clark, who wisely said at the time, well, it's like, Miss America. Somebody else wins next year, so you should go back and while you've got a bit of traction, try and make some connections and meet some people. And so that's what we did. We came straight back and, put ourselves into awesome hock and melted some credit cards and went back for 3 months and just hung out,
Yeah, right. So was that return visit purely for like a bit of a pilgrimage or a bit more of a networking tour, or did you have shows to line up, or did you just purely go there to maybe meet some of the greats from yesteryear who are still kicking?
All of the above. All of the above. Said the irrepressible preacher managed to book quite a lot of gigs. From Australia, from a standing start, just by ringing people up and bamboozling them with his
He does have the gift of the
charm.
gab. Absolutely.
Hi, I'm representing an Australian blues woman and you need to have a... So, look, we ended up doing an astonishing number of gigs. We had a 3-month window for a visa kind of arrangement where we could go for 3 months. And so, we started off, we had mutual friends through Jeff Atchison, so Jeff, who sort of Australian guitarists from Melbourne who have gone on before and forged some connections were really helpful. So friends of Jeff's in Atlanta, we went there, we hung out and met a lot of people from the Blues Foundation in Memphis, but also from regional blues societies, and I had a dream that at the end of this 3-month period that I would meet some musicians and somehow do a gig that I would record and I would make an album from it, which I managed to do, which was Live in Atlanta, which has just recently become available on digital platforms. And for that particular album, for a live gig, I had Bob Margolin playing with me at that gig, and Kaz Kazanoff from Austin, Texas, who's I didn't know at the time, was such a well-credentialed producer as well as arranger for the Texas Horns, and a fabulous player. And people said, and we did a little gig on the outskirts of Atlanta, and I flew Bob and Kaz in, and people said, "How did you get those guys to play?" I said, "I just asked them." I actually had met Kaz Kazanoff at a blues festival in Portland, Oregon, where I went on to live later. Great music scene in Portland traditionally for jazz and blues. They laugh up there and say it rains so much that you have to be good at indoor sports like music in the Southwest. Seattle's a bit like that too. But I was at the Waterfront Blues Festival, and, I was walking past a little tent that was having workshops in it. A lot of blues people seem to fall, you're a guitarist first, but then people often fall into a camp of, do you like harmonica or saxophone? That'll tell you a little bit about what style of blues you prefer, Uh-huh. And I would have always said that I was a traditional harmonica type of person. But I was walking past this tent and I heard this sax tone, and the saxophone was just so compelling that I walked in and I sat and listened to a whole workshop on saxophone, which was being run by Kaz Kazanoff. And I didn't know Kaz at the time. And after the workshop finished, I said, "Look, I don't play saxophone, but, I just loved your workshop. I just love your tone. I love what, could we stay in touch?" And he gave me a card and we had a lovely conversation. And so then that contact became, he came and played on the show that became Live in Atlanta. When I then managed to get a record deal with an American label, Yellow Dog Records, they asked me where I wanted to record, and I went, well, hey, I went to Austin, recorded with Kaz then as a producer for I made a bunch of albums with him, and then met people in Austin, Texas through that. So, all these pathways were often about making personal connections as well as musical connections.
Absolutely.
And it's been delightful. I've made some really good friends. I think the blues has gifted me some lifelong fabulous friendships.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Such a great community of people. Everyone who hangs out in the blues scene I've met, especially long-term bluesers or just long-term players, are generally honest, just happy to help if they can, and just a real great little community.
Well, as you were, was asking me earlier about how long I'd been, my current place.
Yeah.
And, at one point, Steve and I had lived, the statistics have ramped up since then, but at one point we lived in 10 different houses in 8 years in 2 different countries. And so we did, and looking down the barrel of having to move again.
Yeah.
I was like, what a drag. But the thing is, when you have moved a lot and relocated, it's like one of the first things you do when you move to a new place is you find out if there is a pub that does blues, if you find out if there's a local venue, you find out the nearest active blues society in your area, and you go and find your people. And that's what I've done, and and it's great. You can often, it can be a really good introduction to an area, and certainly in places that I've lived, that's been really important. Yeah,
you definitely have moved around a lot, you guys. It's great, and like you said, every time you move somewhere new, you suss out what's going on, who to talk to, or who to just create a good, feel good response in your community, and along the way you meet some great people, and you hang on to a lot of friendships, and
yeah, definitely,
it's good for the soul. Totally. So tell me about your work with Hubert. So for those who don't know, Hubert was a wonderful guitar player who played with Howlin' Wolf through most of Wolf's career. He wasn't on every record, but he was on the majority of his stuff. How did you get onto Hubert? Did you meet him at a festival somewhere? Because I remember I first met Hubert at Prairie du Chien, a place called the Prairie Dog Blues Festival. He was headlining, and I happened to be there at the time and managed to catch up with Hubert, and he signed the back of my guitar string packet at the time. I was like, oh, Mr. Sumlin, can you, he's like, oh, boy, where you from? And we got talking some stories. I actually struggled to understand him at the time. Thick accent. But then I managed to catch up with him when you toured him down here in Australia. It's probably actually one of my musical highlights, I think, is being on stage at Blues Fest with you guys, Hubert and Chris Wilson on harp. And we did Smokestack, and then we finished that. That was great. I was like unplugging my guitar, and then Chris Wilson's like, "You're not going anywhere. You're staying on stage." And then he just said, "We're doing Evil. 1, 2, 3, 4," and just started into the next song. I was like, "Wow, that was amazing." Get to play two Wolf songs with Hubert and Chris Wilson and you guys. It was just so magic. Yeah, that was definitely one of my musical highlights.
Yeah, it's so nice. Hubert was a beautiful gentleman as well as a seminal guitar player. Really, he wasn't on every Wolf recording. There's a few early ones he's not on, and later on there's the 2 guitars with him and Jody Williams on a lot of things.
Yeah.
But actually that tour where we brought him to Blues Fest was when I met Hubert, and I couldn't believe it, because I'd actually met how that came about was I'd met Bob Margolin.
Yes.
And I'd played with Bob. Bob played with Muddy Waters for many years. And I'd met Bob and played with him, and then invited him to this gig which I recorded for Live in Atlanta for the album I released there.
Yeah. And
so then we had this idea, we'll release that album in Australia and we'll bring Bob Margolin out to play for, and Blues Fest, of course, is as being one of our biggest festivals, had the wherewithal financially to bring out international artists.
Yeah.
So we started putting that into place as an idea, and we had that most of the way down the track. And then the booker, Bob Margolin's booker in the States, got back to us and said, look, we've made a mistake. We've double booked Bob Margolin. He's not available. Would you be interested in taking Hubert Sumlin? And I was just beside myself. I was just I had to pick my jaw up and went, because I still remember the visceral reaction I had to hearing, as a young blues fan, hearing Howling Wolf and some of those tracks like Moaning at Midnight and Smokestack Lightning, and those tracks just going, wow, this is and I guess I never tried to play that sort of stuff to start with. I guess as I was I'm self-taught, and I found that the acoustic blues stuff a little bit more accessible. I didn't ever think that I would have the oomph. A lot of Chicago blues seemed to be at that time to be so muscular and so masculine that I couldn't see myself doing a creditable job at it. So I left it alone, and much in the same way as, well, nobody ever told Mississippi John Hurt to get more masculine or tougher, But so there's obviously quite a spectrum there. But I started off doing more of that Mississippi John Hurt sort of stuff.
But honey, I got your number, baby, and you can't fool me. Yeah, you lay down with the dog, baby, you gonna get up with fleas. Well, the pack you've been running with are nothing but fools. You bring yourself down playing by their rules. Check your palate in the morning, baby, and you'll see that you lay down with the dog, baby, you gonna get up with fleas.
So, and then I had the opportunity to join a band. So I played with the Mojos, which was for most of its history an all-female blues band, where we played more honky-tonk blues, swing, a lot of swing and a lot of New Orleans-y stuff.
Yep.
But really hard, sort of tough Chicago stuff I hadn't ever really played, although I realise now that a lot of the Mississippi acoustic blues I was playing, if you just take that, electrify it and put some attitude to it, you've got early Chicago blues. It's just, it's a matter of, it is a matter of the attack and the attitude and the electrifying of it that makes it that. But at the time I was a little bit daunted, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to play with Bob Margolin, because I thought, well, I can really learn something from Bob, because he plays the Muddy Water stuff to a T. He's a real keeper of that style.
Yeah.
And so I was looking to, try and expand, and my musicianship and learn more about this. But then to suddenly go, okay, I'm playing with Bob Margolin, I've at least played with him. How about Hubert? And I went, gee, I have to put together a band and I have to step up. And I never really played any of that stuff.
Sure.
And that was part of the reason why, as I put together my first band post my long-term girl band, the Mojos, I had Dean Addison on bass, Mark Grundon on drums, who's still drumming with me. And I asked Chris Wilson to play harmonica, partly because I thought he would have the incredible personal charisma to sing some Howling Wolf stuff.
Yeah.
And the harmonica, of course, as well. But also because of my deep respect for Chris and his position in the blues world, is that he had so much stage presence, and just if you're going to be on stage, give it all you've got or go home.
Yeah.
He had that attitude, and I thought,
absolutely,
if I am suddenly thrown for the first time truly into being a band leader and putting together an act to tour Hubert Sumlin, I surround myself with players that will make me step up to that level and do my very best. And it was a huge learning curve, and it was wonderful to meet Hubert and find that everyone who met him says the same, that he was kind, he was gentle, he was attentive, he was just delightful to hang out with, and you know, he was not that long out of it was within a year of him having a lung removed from having lung cancer, so he was still a little frail. I saw him a couple of years later back in the States, and he was not quite so frail, but you know, he could pick up any guitar through anything, and this is, you know, people think it's in the pedals or in the something.
Oh no!
Whatever he picked up and he played, he sounded like Hubert Sumlin, and you know, idiosyncratic, angular phrasing, just sometimes weird. Sometimes nothing would happen, and you'd wait, and then a flurry of stuff would happen, and it's just like, what just happened there, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, what a remarkable player and what a remarkable, lovely man.
Yeah, and what a heritage and what a pleasure it would have been to share the stage with him for... Did you guys tour it as well, or did you just do Blues Fest? Is that...
No, we did a gig in Melbourne at the Corner Hotel, which was, you know, which was great. And then we did a gig at the Vanguard in Sydney.
Newtown, yeah.
And then we did 2 shows at Blues Fest.
Cool.
And then that was the only tour dates I did with Hubert, but we caught up again then back in the States several times over the years. And one beautiful moment, one beautiful weekend, that was about 2006, I think, or 7. I actually, because he was often on the road, he was, you know, still touring or living out of New York with his manager, but he had a little house in Milwaukee, and he contacted me and my friend Suzanne Holmes, who was doing tour management for me at the time, on one of the tours I was doing over there, and said that he was home in Milwaukee for a weekend and would we come and visit.
Oh, that's nice.
So we just dropped everything, grabbed tickets and flew and went and spent the weekend with Hubert in his home. And that was a really incredible experience, because he had a lot of memorabilia sort of scattered around. It's only a modest little house, and down in his basement he had stuff set up. He had still, you know, where he used to practice, and he had he had a slot machine at his front door. He loved to gamble. So he had his own little slot machine. He could just he could gamble dimes and stuff. And I got to tell you this, because this has been oft-told, but it encapsulates part of that delight for someone who is a fan first and then a musician. It's like, I just arrived with Suzanne at Hubert's house, and he ushered us into his little front sitting room, and we were sitting down and we were just beginning to chat and catch up. And the phone rings, and he gets up and he ambles over to the phone. He picks up the phone and goes, "Oh, hey, Cotton, how you doing?" James Cotton is calling just to ring up because he heard that he was home, and just ring up their old childhood friends. He just ring up to say good day. Of
course.
And I'm thinking, you know, again, James Cotton and some of his, like 100% Cotton, still love that album. You know, like these were people making music that's really foundational to my excitement about the genre of music. And it's just, you know, you have to pinch yourself, really.
Yeah, especially in the States. I remember when I was hanging out in Chicago there for a little while. Yeah, the people you just see, and you go down to Buddy Guy's for a Wednesday night or Monday night jam. You know, Buddy's there at the end of the bar, and then like Kim Wilson comes in, and they end up having a play. Or it's just crazy. Yeah, James Cotton was playing at a festival just down the road, and it's just insane.
Yeah,
and they're still active. That's what I love about it. Is you know, it's not like a genre where it's just like flash in the pan. You know, you've made your say at your get. It's like if you're into the music and you're honest and you're performing, it keeps you young. It keeps you fresh and, you know, energetic. And like I said, it's a social thing. You get to hang out with your mates. It's such a great way to spend, you know,
as Red Payton from Red's Duke joint in class on Mississippi would say the game's for life.
Yeah.
And I think we're all aspiring to do a Pine Top Perkins if we can. Pine Top recorded with me on my Blues Woman album, which was recorded in Austin, Texas, where he was living in his later years. And I invited him to come down the session. He ended up playing on one track.
Yeah.
And he was 96 then.
Wow.
And he was still touring, and he's still trying to chat me up, and it's like, I'd like to take you home, anyway. But he was, and he died just shy of his 98th birthday, having won the Grammy for Traditional Blues Album of the Year earlier that year with him and Willie Big Eye Smith.
Yeah.
So, and he still had tour dates on the book.
Yep. That's right.
He's the poster boy for a touring musician with bad health habits. He still smoked. He didn't.
Really?
He quit drinking. I think he was about 90, but he still smoked and pretty much lived on McDonald's.
Wow.
So, what can you say about blues plus good genes? I don't know.
Pine Top. Yeah, he was actually. I think I saw him at the Chicago Blues Festival playing there, doing a bit of a Chicago All Stars band. Yeah, I think Willie Big Eyes was there. Calvin Fuzz Jones maybe on bass. Yeah, it was a bit of a muddy tribute. That was magic. Yeah, it's such a different pool of history there. Like, it's such a rich, deep musical culture. Like, it's insane.
One time when one year they had, I've been lucky and blessed and honoured to have several nominations in the Blues Music Awards in America. And one year they held the awards, it's traditionally held in Memphis, but one year the Blues Foundation held the awards in Tunica. And we all went down after the day after, because they were dedicating a blues trail marker at Hobson's plantation just outside of Clarksdale, which was dedicated to Pine Top, because he grew up there and picked cotton there as a young man. And as it turned out, we didn't have a car, so we were sort of having to get a ride with someone. We got there and we sort of missed the event. They'd unveiled the thing and everyone had gone home. And what was left was actually, Pine Top, Hubert, Willie Big Eyes Smith, and a couple of other people were all sitting on the front step of the commissary at Hobson's, having a drink and smoking cigarettes and talking about their, reminiscing about their childhoods, and Pine Top was talking about living there as a young man and picking cotton and seeing the first tractors. They trialled some of the first tractors at Hobson's. And it was, you were saying earlier about finding it difficult to understand the old Mississippi black guys when they're talking, and I just love the rhythms. I love the rhythms of their speech and the way they talk to each other. And sometimes, and that to me, that was a wonderful experience, just to sit there in that place with such a sense of place.
Yes.
On a plantation at Hobson's out of Clarksdale, and listen to these guys, because they would, one of them would make an observation, the other would go, It's like half the conversation was just noises, I swear, but they were all telling their stories, and that
would have been a moment, total pinch me moment, I reckon, like looking back at it now, going, wow, I'm so glad that moment, happened, and I happened to be there, and that's so cool.
And of course, we've lost so many of the old guys and women,
Yeah.
I was really I was sad that I never got a chance to meet Jessie Mae Hemphill, or never, hung out with her. But, I have had a chance to go to Como, Mississippi in recent years, and I've played her guitar.
Oh, wow.
Which has got a bullet hole clear through the top bout.
Whoa.
She shot her guitar at one point, and
she shot it. She didn't get it like bullet hole while she was playing it. No, okay.
No, she in her final few years, she played gospel music, and she had a stroke, and she decided that God was punishing her because she'd played blues, and so she shot her guitar.
Oh.
But then she reneged and it still played all right, so she she kept playing it.
A battle scar.
If I should die before the daylight comes, where would you lay to rest the restless bones, a rambler without a home? If I should die before the soft first light, would I sail across to the
So tell me about the key to the city down in Clarksdale. How presented with the key to the city in 2012? Is that?
Yeah.
Tell me about that one, Fee.
That was lots of stories around that one. It was weird because I'd gone to Clarksdale to play as part of the Duke Joint Festival, which traditionally is very much about local Mississippi players or maybe Arkansas players from the region. And although there's always music happening in Clarksdale, and they pride themselves on that, they have a whole lot of pop-up juke joints as well as the usual places, and a whole lot of stages in the streets. There's a lot going on, and that's where I would have seen players like Elsie Ulmer and Robert Wolfman Belfour. I also had a chance to tour and play a little bit with wonderful local players, Sidell Davis.
Right.
So all those kind of players are the players that normally play there, as well as, the local Clarksdale guys. And so I was kind of pretty chuffed to have a gig there. And I was there in town ahead of time, and friends said, "Oh, you must go to the Welcome Back Aussie reception." And I was like, "What?"
The what?
And in one of the streets of downtown Clarksdale, there's an old bank building, and they fly the American flag, and next to that, or just underneath it, they fly an Australian flag. And that's a traditional thing that they do. And it's partly because over the years they've had just so many Australian blues tourists come that it became a bit of a thing to have a Welcome Aussie thing at the beginning of Juke Joint to welcome all the Australians. And they were doing a special in the local paper, the Clarksdale Press Register, and they were asking various Australians why is this, why do so many Australians go to Clarksdale, Mississippi? And the best I could come up with was that there's part of the Australian ethos traditionally that values the character, whether it's the larrikin, the outsider, just the character. We like characters, and places like Mississippi and Clarksdale in particular are full of them, And so, we're not coming for the beaches, we're not coming for the scenery, but the culture and the people are really compelling, So that was my take on it. But anyway, I thought that I was just, this was just a thing. I'd been invited to go. That sounded good. I went along, and I was just going to sort of pop in, and then I think I had a gig to go to, and then in the midst of the proceedings, the mayor at the time, Henry Espy, called me up and said, "We have a guest of honour this year, and this year the keys to the city are going to, Fiona Boyes." And so I was not given a heads up about this. It was completely unexpected, and I was suddenly on the podium saying thank you. But I must say that it was no strain at all to string together a quick impromptu speech about the importance of Clarksdale and in the scheme of things in blues history and for me personally. And it was a great honour, and it's on my blues shrine.
Great.
Of memorabilia.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I've actually haven't ever dealt down that part of the States. I'd love to get down there, maybe take the kids and the family one day, and we'll cruise around and check out some of those early areas down in Clarksdale. Yeah, culturally rich areas like that. Totally. I'd love to.
Yeah.
Have you heard
they really are.
The Black Keys new record? It's not new. They've just brought out a new one, but I think, have you heard the Delta Cream record they brought out?
No, I haven't actually.
It's all very Junior Kimbrough-y. It's so good. It sounds like it's recorded down there in a juke joint somewhere. It just sounds great. It's really swampy, and I think it even has the slide guitar player from R.L. Burnside's band. Is it Kenny Brown?
Yeah.
Is that his name?
Oh, Kenny Brown. Kenny Brown
so,
is fantastic. Really, Kenny Brown, and he's really interesting because he's local white guy that played with all those, Black Mississippi Hills players, and Lightning Malcolm too.
Oh yeah.
And to some extent, even though they're from out of state, Reverend Payton's and his Big Damn Band, which is basically a duo. There's still a lot of people carrying on the that Mississippi Hills thing, and it's really when you go to Clarksdale and you see it's not that far distance-wise between the Delta and the Mississippi Hills, and to go to Como, Mississippi, but the music is quite different, and I found exploring some of this stuff really interesting, and the rhythms are different, and it's a really interesting thing to explore.
So, Fee, tell me, you've just re-released Blues in My Heart. Has it been 20 years? Is that the purpose for that?
Yeah, I had an idea that this is before the pandemic and before we all sort of got locked down.
Yep.
But I had in the back of my mind, my very first album that I made under my own name was Blues in My Heart in 2000. And that was recorded by Black Market Music in Melbourne. And it was essentially done live to analog tape.
Yep.
And like a lot of musicians, I've made a lot of albums in the intervening years, and you tend to, write new, as you become more of a songwriter, you write new material, you make new albums, you play that, you keep going. And I hadn't revisited that album for a long time, and a few years ago I was on tour in the States, and I was staying with Suzanne Holmes. I mentioned her earlier. She'd been doing some tour management. She also owned the club that I recorded live in Atlanta in. Sure. And, we've stayed fast and dear friends all these years. And we were visiting her. She's living in Florida these days, and she put the album on. And I actually thought, gee, this album really stands up. I think the performances and everything it's interesting because you often move on and think, oh, well, that old thing.
Yeah, that's
and I thought,
dusty old thing.
And I thought that sowed the seed of the idea that it would be nice to re-release that in 2020 as a 20-year celebration, I guess. Yep. And it made me stop and reflect on how that album was quite pivotal. What were the influences and what got me to that recording session, and how did it inform what was about to happen in the next 20 years.
Sugar daddy, where are you? 'Cause I'm so broke, what's a poor girl gonna do? I should know the score. I left the blues in my back door.
It was an album which was a stepping off point, because a lot of that stuff was the material I was going on to play a few years later at the International Blues Challenge, which got me to America. So I thought, well, I would do a beautiful remastering job on that. And then I spent the initial parts of lockdown thinking this album was originally released, essentially a limited release in Australia, but now that I have a wider audience, particularly in America, who haven't heard the album, where it's never been released there. So I signed the album to Reference Recordings, who's been releasing my recent projects there in California. Right. They're a wonderful label. They're not a blues label, they're an audiophile label. Mm-hmm. And they've been really supportive and helpful. And they love information, like a lot of audiophile people do. They like background. So I put together a 24-page booklet to go with the re-release, which was really good because I found, baby photos of first playing and sort of managed to, find some archival materials, old photos. Yeah. And so it's like a memoir. So that there's like a 24-page potted history of what I was doing. And it was great fun researching that and finding the images and stuff to go with it. And so I had that idea, but I think probably, as it turned out, being in lockdown gave me more time to devote to it. And then that gave me, I released that in 2020. It's actually still in the Australian Blues and Roots radio chart.
Cool. Nice.
So it's been in there for 14 months or whatever. Yep. And but I am plotting and scheming. I have 2 albums in mind for new stuff. I while we were in lockdown and we were all miserable, I wrote an album's worth of fun stuff. It's the party album, which I feel we need, but I haven't yet had a chance to work out when I can record it because I hear it with horn sections and a big band and a really fun... Like
a New Orleans sort of Louisiana sort of style.
Okay. Yeah, up-tempo sort of thing.
Yep.
But in the meantime, at the beginning of the year, I was down in Melbourne briefly and normally when I record something, I like to be really organised. I like to record really quickly. I like to record live in 2 or 3 days but I think about what I'm going to do before I hit the studio. And my recent projects have been done with a guy called Colin Wynn at 30 Mill Studios in Melbourne, and I just love his sensibilities. He used to do a lot of work with Chris Wilson also, and we just really connected on our sensibilities, and so that's been great. But, of course, they were in lockdown a lot in Melbourne. I was in lockdown. I couldn't even... So as it turned out, I was in Melbourne for family reasons, and I just went, I don't know what I'm going to do quite, Colin, but do you have a moment? I'm just going to come in and I got Mark Grunden, my drummer. I don't know what we're going to do, Marky, but let's go in. And we just recorded a bunch of stuff, more around new stuff I'd done on the cigar boxes. Okay. So what I'm working on at the moment is then straight after that, the studio had to be dismantled and I'm stuck up here and who knows when I'll get a chance to finish it and mix it and stuff. But I think that will probably be the next release, which will be more around a kind of minimal, a lot of funky percussion, chains and on chains dropped onto washboards and homemade percussion, cigar boxes, a lot more informed by some of my Mississippi influences.
Great.
I think that would be the next thing, whatever
Mark enjoying that as well, like really sinking his teeth into that sort of style of percussion. And did I see you doing some recording with Jeff Lang as well? Because he's got a studio at his place.
Yeah, well, see, we did this initial recording with Colin Wynn, and as I said, I did that quick session, and he'd been in a space for decades and suddenly had to move. So he was in the midst of trying to rebuild his studio elsewhere. So just recently I was down in Melbourne and I'd been listening to the original tracks. And as I said, most of the things we were doing were kind of either new songs, reasonably off the cuff, and some of it not with drums, just with, we've only got half an hour left. Chuck up some congas and a tambourine, and I'll play together. So, and there was just a couple of things where I thought I can hear this with a bit more kick drum or some percussion, or there was about three or four tracks where I could hear more percussion, and Colin's studio's not yet rebuilt. So he said, well, look, how about you go, and spend And we literally just spent like a couple of hours at Jeff's, which
Cool.
was really fun. Jeff Lang, of course, is a mate as well, and he's got sonic antennas that are from another planet. And we got in there, and I said my instructions to Mark was on one track was just, I just hear more trash on this. I just want one more percussion part with more trash.
Yeah.
And he said, no worries. Went out to his car, came back with a rubbish bin lid, which he drilled holes in and put bolts through.
I like rivets. Yeah, right.
He also had his electric drill with him. So he drilled a hole in that, popped it so that it would go onto his hi-hat stand, got some mallets out, and started experimenting with that. So anyway, this is the kind of sonic hijinks we got up to, but it was a lot of fun.
I look forward to hearing snippets of that. Absolutely. Well, Fee, I reckon we might look at wrapping it up in a minute, but before we do, I want to just talk quickly about guitars, because there might be a few guitar listeners out there. Hopefully there's a few people out there listening. Your number one 68 Telecaster. Tell me, how did you find that guitar, and what is it about that guitar that you, I guess, became one with, or what was the attributes of that particular guitar that really inspired you to get the master sound? Because you had that built afterwards, right? You had that sort of modelled after the neck profiles and stuff. So, yeah.
The 68 Tele came about, and I actually bought that on spec from someone. I can't even remember where I got it from, but I bought it maybe at the swap shop, which is still an iconic place to buy secondhand gear in Melbourne. I started off playing acoustic guitar. I didn't own it. I won an acoustic guitar in a talent competition. The story's all in the liner notes of the reissue of Blues in My Heart. But I had an acoustic guitar, and really, when I joined the Mojos, I needed an electric, and I borrowed various guitars. And for the initial period, I played a Les Paul copy. It was a plywood thing. It was not doing me any favours, but I was so underconfident, and I think this is a real issue for women too. And again, hopefully things are changing. But for me, I was finding that, I'd go to a guitar exhibition, and people would just treat you like you didn't exist. They would take guitars out of your hands, or ask if you knew how to plug it in. And, you often got a lot of discrimination at a guitar shop walking in. If you were asking for certain strings and they didn't have them, they'd say, oh, well, look, what does he want them for? Why don't you get these strings for him? And you go, no, they're actually for me.
Yeah, right.
I think I had a lot of those kind of experiences.
Yep.
This guitar that I borrowed and I was playing was stolen. So I ended up literally having gigs with the Mojos and having no guitar. And I was borrowing guitars for each gig, and I played all sorts of really inappropriate things because I was just, getting through and having to work out what it was that I wanted. And I came across this old Tele, and I went, this is it. For starters, I just want one volume and one tone.
Yes.
I want something uncomplicated. I want something that is like a blank canvas, and I think that's what a Tele often is. It's just like, it sounds different in different people's hands, but it's just basically an honest plank of wood. And I liked, at that time I was a little bit confronted by electric sound, so I couldn't go to the back pickup, but the neck pickup was all right.
Yep.
I went more mellow sounds to pokier sounds as I got more confident.
Sure.
But I liked the feel of the neck. I liked the tension of that scale length. And I liked that in the idea of the heat of battle, you didn't have a whole lot of knobs, tone and volume.
Yeah. And
as it turned out, that was my go-to main guitar for many, many years. I was playing a Maton acoustic, and at one point Maton approached me and said that they were messing around with electric builds, and they would like to build me an electric guitar, and they were sort of messing around with launching or relaunching their Master Sound electric range. So I went in to play one, and I didn't like it. And this was a learning curve for me. I've never been particularly peck-headed, but what I discovered with that was that I didn't like it, how it felt. It felt too bendy. Now, what I learned out of that process was that it was because it was originally designed as a short scale instrument.
Like a Gibson scale.
And and I didn't, and Pat Evans, who designed it, was quite adamant that that's the scaling that it should have. And I went, look, if you're going to build me one, can you soup up the pickups, and can you give me a scale length that's to the same as my old Fender Tele?
Yep.
And so I want a long scale, and so anyway, and they said afterwards, that this experience of building things for working players is actually really useful because of the feedback that they get. And so they built my Master Sound, which was one of the first long scale ones they made.
Yep.
And because it was at the Maton factory for a few weeks before I could get around to coming and picking it up, various people played it and liked it. The upshot of that was that they ended out making production runs of long scales as well as short scales.
Oh, great. Cool.
But the long scale one of the other things I wanted, I said, look, if you're going to build me a guitar, I love my Tele. I love my old Tele. So if you're going to build me a guitar that I'm going to actually play, we need to think about making it do something different from what the Tele does.
Sure.
So what I said to them is that I want a guitar that is rigid enough to finger pick on, bendy enough to be electric, with a lot of bottom end, because the Telecaster is wonderful, but the nature of a Telecaster is that the sound is thinner. So what I found was that the Telecaster is great in a bigger ensemble because it'll cut through.
Yeah,
Man,
it's got its
you get the
frequency
Telecaster,
range. Yeah.
Frequency range is there. But the Master Sound has a bigger tonal range, and I ended up getting that guitar, and the first tour I played it on was the tour with Hubert Sumlin.
Really? That was the first.
Playing Chicago-y stuff, the smaller ensemble just with guitar, bass, drums and harmonica.
Sure.
And the fatter bottom end and the richer sound of that instrument was perfect. And yet it could be mellow and it can be rude.
Yep.
And it ended out really setting me up to where I've come now. That guitar made a huge difference to the way I play, and it's my go-to guitar now. If
Sure.
I only can take one guitar, I'll take the Master Sound because it's rigid enough. I can play finger-picking stuff on it, and I can play Mississippi Hill stuff on it.
Yes.
And like most electric guitars, if you try and play finger-picking stuff on it, it doesn't have enough bottom end to hold, and yet that instrument does.
Do you think that comes from string gauge, string height, or like pickup outputs, or the certain tone of the pickups, or do you think it's a wood choice, or do you think it's a combination of everything, or like how do they come to that rich low end?
I think it's a combination of everything. I know that it has got hotted up Alnico pickups.
And are they Maton pickups, or are they they got?
You can split them from single coil to humbucker.
Yep.
Although, again, to be honest, I'm not particularly techie. It's just like I know what I like. I like that sound. So I don't do a lot of messing with it. I do change. I tend to use it. It has neck, middle, and back.
Yep.
Selectors. I tend to use it in the middle, although I do occasionally use the back pickup setting.
Yep. A bit of sting.
And the other thing is that originally the original Master Sound design had 3 pots, and I got them to rewire it to just be one volume, one tone, like a Tele.
Excellent.
Which left me with a hole and scratch plate for many years. And I ended out, I'm going to hold this up for you, even though nobody at home can see this. I'm going to describe it. So this instrument now.
Oh, it's good. You've got a coin on there, don't you?
Hole pickup.
Yeah.
It now has an American silver dollar, and that's an original 1935 American silver dollar, which my husband Steve bought for me as congratulations, good luck charm. He bought it in a secondhand store in Memphis the day after I won the International Blues Challenge in 2003.
Great.
And that was a reference to a song that I have about Memphis Minnie. Memphis Minnie famously had a silver dollar bracelet that she wore in a lot of her publicity photos.
Right.
And I referenced that in some lyrics to a song about her that I wrote. And so Steve said, oh, here's a little nod to Memphis Minnie, here's a silver dollar. And so now that silver dollar's set into my favourite touring guitar as an ongoing nod to Memphis Minnie, the girl guitar player of her generation.
That's fantastic. I love it when a bit of personality seeps into people's instruments. They don't just pick up a thing from the shop and just. I like a few little modifications. I think that's nice. A few personal touches, and to have a gift like that, that's great. Well, Fee, I just noticed my kids walking in the door and they're going to interrupt this podcast with lots of kid noises, and I'm hungry, Dads. So let's leave it there. It's been great hanging out and having a chat, and all the best, and hopefully we get to catch up again soon.
Okay, thanks so much for having me, Pete.
Cheers, Fee.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks for listening, folks, to another episode of Say It With Guitars. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, share it around to your mates, leave a good review, and hopefully we'll see you next time.